What if animals didn't exist for 88% of Earth's history? Welcome to the second arc of Chronicles of Life. You're about to witness the setup for Earth's greatest biological transformation, the Cambrian Explosion. But before we see that spectacular event, we need to understand what came before it. This episode explores the Precambrian Stage, the vast era spanning 88% of Earth's history when life existed in forms completely alien to our modern eyes. You'll discover the strange creatures that pioneered complex life, the environmental catastrophes they survived, and the evolutionary innovations that set the stage for everything to come. This is the story of life's patient preparation before its greatest revolution. Imagine standing on a beach 600 million years ago. You look out at the ocean, endless, dark, and seemingly lifeless. No fish jump from the waves, no birds cry overhead, no crabs scuttle across the sand. Yet life is everywhere, abundant and thriving. How is that possible? Here's the stunning truth. For 3 billion years, 88% of Earth's entire existence, complex animals simply didn't exist. Life was dominated by microscopic bacteria and single-celled organisms invisible to any eye. Then, in the final act of this vast era, something extraordinary happened. The first complex creatures appeared, and they looked like nothing alive today. Picture Dickinsonia, a flat, oval organism up to 1.4 meters long, lying on the seafloor like a quilted mattress with ribbed segments running its length. No mouth, no eyes, no brain, yet it lives successfully for millions of years. Or consider Charnia, a delicate fern-like creature standing upright in deep waters where sunlight never reached, swaying gently as it absorbed nutrients from the surrounding ocean. These were the Ediacaran organisms, Earth's first experiments with large, multicellular bodies. They were peaceful, strange, and perfectly adapted to a world we can barely imagine. But their peaceful existence was about to end. The stage was being set for a transformation that would change life forever. Why did these creatures appear when they did? And what happened to them? To answer those questions, we need to understand where they came from. Evolution, the 3 billion year journey to complexity. How did life evolve from single cells to these bizarre, multicellular pioneers? The journey required 3 fundamental breakthroughs, each building on the last. Breakthrough 1, the oxygen revolution. For Earth's first 2 billion years, the atmosphere contained almost no free oxygen. Life existed, but it was anaerobic, thriving without oxygen or even poisoned by it. Then, around 2.4 billion years ago, cyanobacteria, photosynthetic microbes, began producing oxygen as a waste product. Why does oxygen matter? Because it's the most efficient fuel for life. When cells break down sugars using oxygen, they generate about 18 times more energy than without it. This extra energy budget is what makes complex, active life possible. But oxygen was initially catastrophic. For organisms adapted to an oxygen-free world, this gas was toxic. The Great Oxidation Event caused the mass extinction of anaerobic life. However, it also opened new possibilities. Organisms that could tolerate or use oxygen gained access to vastly more energy. By the Ediacaran period, 63554, 1 million years ago, oxygen levels had risen to perhaps 10 to 15% of the atmosphere compared to today's 21%. This was enough. Enough for cells to build larger bodies. Enough for tissues to specialize. Enough for the first animals to emerge. Breakthrough to multicellularity and specialization. Single cells face size limits. As a cell grows larger, its surface area can't keep up with its volume, making it harder to absorb nutrients and expel waste efficiently. How do you get bigger? By becoming multicellular, many cells working together. The first multicellular organisms appeared around 2.1 billion years ago. Initially, these were simple colonies of identical cells. But over time, cells began specializing. Some focused on gathering nutrients, others handled reproduction. Still others provided structure and support. This division of labor was revolutionary. Instead of every cell doing everything poorly, specialized cell types could perform specific functions excellently. Muscle cells could contract. Digestive cells could process food. Structural cells could provide support. This specialization is what we call tissue. Tissue is the foundation of complex bodies. By the Ediacaran period, life had mastered tissue organization. Organisms could grow to substantial sizes, some over a meter long, with differentiated tissues performing coordinated functions. Breakthrough 3. The genetic toolkit. But having many cells isn't enough. You need to organize them into functional patterns. How does a single fertilized egg know how to develop into an organism with a head at one end, organs in the middle, and a tail at the other? The answer is regulatory genes, molecular switches that control when and where other genes turn on or off. The most famous are Hox genes, which establish body patterns during development. These genes tell cells, you're part of the head, you're part of the middle, you're part of the tail. Here's what's remarkable. Scientists have discovered that many key regulatory genes, including Hox genes, already existed before complex animals appeared. The genetic toolkit was in place, waiting to be used in new ways. Evolution didn't need to invent new genes, it just needed to rearrange and repurpose existing ones. By the late Precambrian, all three breakthroughs had converged. Sufficient oxygen for energy, multicellular organization with specialized tissues, and genetic tools for patterning complex bodies. The ingredients for the Cambrian Explosion were ready. Anatomy, the strange bodies of Ediacaran life. What did these first complex organisms actually look like? Their anatomy was radically different from anything alive today, and that tells us something profound about how evolution works. External anatomy of Dickinsonia. Dickinsonia had a flat, oval body divided into segments radiating from a central axis, like a series of ribs or folds. The body could reach 1.4 meters in length and appeared quilted or corrugated. The organism had no obvious head or tail. Both ends looked nearly identical. The upper surface was smooth or slightly textured. The underside, the part touching the seafloor, was where absorption happened. There were no appendages, no eyes, no mouth opening. The entire body plan was optimized for one thing: maximizing surface area for nutrient absorption. Internal anatomy, simple but functional. What was inside these creatures? We can't know for certain. Soft tissues rarely preserve, but chemical analysis and comparisons with modern organisms give us clues. Dickinsonia likely had no organs as we understand them. No heart, no brain, no stomach. Instead, its body was probably composed of relatively undifferentiated tissue layers of cells that could absorb nutrients, transport them throughout the body, and reproduce. Recent chemical analysis found cholesterol-like molecules in Dickinsonia fossil, strong evidence that it was an animal, not a fungus or plant. Animals produce cholesterol, other groups don't. But it was an animal unlike any that exists today. Some scientists think Dickinsonia might have had a simple network of channels or cavities for distributing nutrients, a primitive circulatory system. Others believe nutrients simply diffused from cell to cell. Without fossilized internal structures, we're left with educated guesses. Charnia's unique structure. Charnia looked like a fern frond, a central stalk, with branches extending at regular intervals on both sides. The organism could grow up to 60 centimeters tall, anchored to the seafloor by a disc-shaped holdfast. How did Charnia work? Its frond-like structure maximized surface area for absorption. Living in deep waters without light, it couldn't photosynthesize. Instead, it likely absorbed dissolved organic matter from the water or housed chemosynthetic bacteria that converted chemicals into food. Internally, Charnia probably consisted of simple tissues with channels for nutrient distribution. The branching pattern wasn't random, it followed mathematical rules similar to modern fractals, optimizing surface area within a compact structure. The absence of complex organs. What's most striking about Ediacaran anatomy is what's missing. No eyes, no mouths, no digestive systems, no muscles for active movement, no hard skeletons or shells. Why the simplicity? Because the Ediacaran world didn't require complexity. There were no predators to flee from, no prey to chase, no competitors to outmaneuver. Organisms could lie passively on the seafloor, absorbing nutrients, growing slowly and reproducing without interference. This simplicity was both their strength and their fatal weakness. They were perfectly adapted to a peaceful world. But that world was about to end. Behavior, life in a peaceful garden. How did these strange creatures actually live? Their behavior was profoundly different from modern animals because the Ediacaran ocean was fundamentally different from today's seas. Feeding, passive absorption. Most Ediacaran organisms didn't hunt, chase, or even move much. They fed through passive absorption, taking in dissolved nutrients, organic particles, or substances produced by symbiotic microbes. Dickinsonia would settle on a bacterial matter-living carpet of microorganisms coating the seafloor. Over days or weeks, it would absorb nutrients directly through its underside. When local resources depleted, it might shift position slightly, leaving a characteristic feeding trace in the sediment. But this wasn't active movement, more like slow, hydraulic repositioning. Charnia, rooted in deep water, couldn't move at all. It filtered or absorbed whatever the currents brought past. This strategy worked because Ediacaran oceans were rich in dissolved organic matter, the accumulated products of billions of years of microbial activity. Reproduction, simple and effective. How did Ediacaran organisms reproduce? We don't know for certain, but the most likely method was asexual budding or fragmentation. A piece of the parent organism would break off or bud outward, developing into a new individual. Some species might have released spores or simple gametes into the water, combining genetic material when they met. But there's no evidence of complex mating behaviors, courtship, or parental care. Reproduction was probably passive, seasonal, and movement minimal and slow. The Ediacaran world was almost static. Most organisms didn't move at all, remaining anchored in place throughout their lives. Those that did move, like Dickinsonia and Cambrian did, so extremely slowly, perhaps a few centimeters per day. Why so little movement? Because there was no need. Food was everywhere, accessible through passive absorption. There were no predators to flee from. The energy cost of movement wasn't worth the benefit. This peaceful existence would seem almost alien to modern eyes. Imagine an ocean where nothing chases, nothing flees, nothing fights. An ocean of patience, where success means outlasting competitors through slow, steady growth. That was the Ediacaran world. Social behavior, none. There's no evidence of social interactions among Ediacaran organisms. No cooperation, no competition, no communication. Each organism lived independently, rarely if ever interacting with its neighbors except through incidental contact. This isolation made sense in a world without predation or complex resource competition. You didn't need allies or social structures. You just needed to absorb nutrients and grow. Simple, effective. Sustainable until it wasn't. Adaptation, surviving Earth's greatest catastrophe. The Ediacaran organisms didn't just appear in favorable conditions, they survived one of the most extreme events in Earth's history and adapted to its aftermath. Challenge 1. Snowball Earth. Between 720 and 635 million years ago, Earth experienced the cryogenian glaciation popularly known as Snowball Earth. Ice sheets expanded from the poles until they covered virtually the entire planet. Oceans froze. Temperatures plummeted to levels that would kill almost everything. How did life survive? Most didn't. But small populations persisted in refuges, perhaps near volcanic vents, providing heat, or in pockets of liquid water beneath the ice where geothermal activity prevented complete freezing. These survivors were tough, flexible, and lucky. When volcanic CO2 finally accumulated enough to trigger a greenhouse effect and melt the isoprocess, taking millions of years, the world that emerged was transformed. Massive amounts of minerals and nutrients washed into the oceans from weathered rock. The seas became a nutrient-rich soup. Adaptation 1. Exploiting nutrient abundance. The post-Snowball Earth ocean was a bonanza. Ediacaran organisms adapted by maximizing their absorptive surface area. The flat, spread-out body of Dickinsonia wasn't just a random design, it was optimization for nutrient absorption in rich waters. The front structure of Charnia served the same purpose, maximum surface area for capturing nutrients from flowing water. These weren't active adaptations in the sense of hunting or gathering. They were passive optimization, being in the right place with the right body plan when resources became abundant. Challenge 2. Rising oxygen levels. Oxygen continued to increase throughout the Ediacaran. This was beneficial, providing energy for larger bodies, but also challenging. Oxygen is chemically reactive and can damage cells if not managed properly. How did Ediacaran organisms adapt? They likely developed antioxidant systems, molecules that neutralize harmful oxygen byproducts. They may have evolved thicker tissue layers or specialized cells to handle oxygen exposure. These adaptations weren't dramatic or visible, but they were essential for survival in an increasingly oxygenated world. Challenge 3. Environmental stability. Perhaps the most important adaptation was simply existing in a stable environment. After the chaos of Snowball Earth, the Ediacaran period was relatively calm, warm temperatures, stable sea levels, consistent chemistry. Ediacaran organisms adapted to stability itself. They optimized for slow growth in unchanging conditions. They invested in long lifespans rather than rapid reproduction. They became specialists in patience. This worked beautifully for a while. But specializing for stability is dangerous when instability returns. And instability was coming in the form of the Cambrian Explosion. Extinction, the end of the peaceful world. As we approach 541 million years ago, the Ediacaran organisms begin to disappear from the fossil record. By the time the Cambrian period is fully underway, almost all are gone. What happened? The arrival of predation. The most likely explanation: predators appeared. For the first time in Earth's history, organisms began actively hunting and eating other organisms. This was revolutionary and catastrophic for Ediacaran life. Imagine being Dickinsonia flat, soft, defenseless, lying peacefully on the sea floor as your ancestors had done for millions of years. Then something new appears, something with a mouth, something that sees you as food. You have no defenses, no shell to protect you, no speed to flee, no ability to fight back. You're a meal waiting to be eaten. Predation changes everything. It creates selection pressure for defenses, which creates pressure for better weapons, which creates pressure for better defenses. An evolutionary arms race begins. But you need time to adapt, and predators don't give you that time. Competition for resources. Even without predation, Ediacaran organisms faced new competition. The Cambrian saw an explosion of diversity, dozens of new body plans, new feeding strategies, new ways of exploiting resources. These new organisms were more efficient. They had mouths for active feeding, muscles for movement, sensory organs for detecting resources. They could outcompete passive absorbers for the same nutrients. Dickinsonia could absorb bacterial mats. But what if a mobile grazer with an actual mouth scraped those mats away before Dickinsonia could absorb them? Competition intensified, and passive strategies became liabilities. Environmental changes, ocean chemistry changed as the Cambrian progressed. The abundant dissolved nutrients of the Ediacaran period declined as more organisms consumed them. Waters that once supported passive absorption required active feeding to sustain large bodies. Oxygen levels continued rising, eventually reaching near-modern concentrations. This favored active, mobile organisms that could exploit the energy oxygen provided. Passive, sedentary Ediacaran organisms couldn't take advantage of this energy windfall. Why complete extinction? Why did Ediacaran organisms go completely extinct rather than surviving in some niches? The answer is their fundamental body plan was obsolete. They had no genetic pathways for developing mouths, eyes, muscles, or shells. Their toolkit was limited to soft, passive absorption. When the world demanded active, defended, mobile life, they had no way to adapt fast enough. Some scientists think a few Ediacaran lineages might have evolved into later groups. Perhaps Cambriella is ancestral to mollusks. But the distinctive Ediacaran body plans themselves vanished. They were evolutionary experiments that worked brilliantly in their time but couldn't transition to the new world. Current status: extinct but not forgotten. The Ediacaran organisms are completely extinct. No living descendants preserve their unique body plans, but their legacy endures. They proved that complex multicellular life was possible. They demonstrated that different cell types could coordinate into functional bodies. They tested body plan strategies that, while ultimately unsuccessful, provided evolutionary lessons. Most importantly, they set the stage. The Ediacaran organisms were the opening act. They prepared the ecosystem, established the basic rules of multicellular existence, and created the conditions that made the Cambrian Explosion possible. They failed to survive, but their failure was necessary for the success that followed. The Precambrian Stage, particularly the Ediacaran period, was Earth's rehearsal for complexity. Life learned to build large bodies, coordinate tissues, and survive environmental catastrophes. The genetic toolkit was assembled. The energy infrastructure was established. The ocean was prepared. What came next was inevitable. All the pieces were in place for an explosion of diversity that would create every major animal group we see today. The peaceful garden was about to become a violent, innovative, spectacular battlefield. In our next episode, you'll witness the Cambrian detonation itself, when predators emerged, when shells and eyes and legs appeared for the first time, when life exploded into forms so diverse that scientists are still struggling to classify them 540 million years later. The stage has been set. The preparation is complete. The greatest show in Earth's history is about to begin. Remember the Ediacaran organisms. Remember Dickinsonia, Charnia, and their strange relatives. They were pioneers who showed that complexity was possible, even if they couldn't survive its consequences. Their story ends, but the story of life is just beginning its most spectacular chapter. This is HistoPrimordia, where history comes alive. Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and join us for the next episode's story.